Hi, my name's Mark Pack. I'm editor of Liberal Democrat Newswire, and welcome to this, the third of my videos explaining what Liberal Democrats get up to at campaign time. In the first one, I talked about the importance of targeting, particularly at general election time, and in the second one, I talked about the importance of leafleting and why Liberal Democrats go through so many different leaflets in an election. For this one, I thought I would talk a little bit about canvassing, why we do it, and a couple of tips on the best ways of doing it. Perhaps the most important thing to say about canvassing is that almost everybody who goes canvassing, that is, knocking door to door, calling on voters on behalf of the party and a candidate, almost everyone who goes canvassing for the first time comes back saying both how they were pleasantly surprised, how generally nice and polite people are on the doorstep, and secondly, how not very many people want to get involved in policy conversations at any great sort of depth or length. And what that means, of course, is that if you feel like, you know what the Liberal Democrats stand for, but maybe don't feel like you've got massive amounts of knowledge about what the party's policies are on a whole load of areas, that absolutely doesn't matter at all. You'll find very rarely do you get asked really detailed questions, and on any occasion like that you do, people respond perfectly reasonably and perfectly happily to you saying, look, I'm terribly sorry, I'm not an absolute expert on that. I don't want to give you the wrong answer by mistake. Is it okay if I make a note of your email address or phone number and get a colleague to get back to you? So that's the first thing to bear in mind, is people are generally pretty polite and you don't get into too many difficult conversations at all. Second thing to remember about canvassing is that people actually are quite impressed when somebody bothers to go around and call on their door. So that's one of the reasons we do canvassing, is because it leaves a really good impression on voters. Makes sense, obviously, to make sure that the voter knows which party you're calling from, so to say that up front when somebody answers the door, and to have a nice clear rosette or badge on as well, so it's really clear which party you're from, so they know which party to give credit to for the fact that you've bothered to call on them. The second reason we do canvassing, aside from the fact that people like it, is it's a really good way of gathering some really important sort of basic information from voters, such as whether or not they're going to vote for us. Really useful to know who our supporters are, so we can do follow-ups of things like asking them maybe to put up a poster for us, or reminding them on polling day to vote. Obviously, from each individual party's point of view, you really want to put your effort into getting out the people who are supporting your candidate and your party on polling day. Getting out somebody who's going to vote for an opponent to vote on polling day is, well, good for democracy, but obviously not quite so good for making sure that we win an election. And the third reason for canvassing is that it can provide some really good sort of qualitative, which is maybe the posh word for anecdotal, but qualitative feedback on how particular messages are working and how particular arguments are playing out and whether they really work well with voters or not, which is often really useful intelligence for the people who are putting together our campaign literature and our campaign advertisements and other publications. As I said up front, the overwhelming experience that people have when they go canvassing for the first time is that people are generally polite. People generally don't want to get into really long, complicated conversations that might show up the limits of your knowledge or anything like that. And canvassing is really effective. It's a really useful part of a winning election campaign. And with so much at stake in this general election, it's perhaps now more important than ever, if you've not canvassed before, to give it a go for the first time. And if you have been canvassing before, and maybe even for a few years or decades, to go out there and try and do that little bit of extra canvassing between now and general election polling day. So thanks very much for listening. I'm not quite sure what topic I'll address in the fourth video in this series, so if you've got any suggestions or any questions, please do pop them up in the comments threads. Thank you very much.